What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and Hockey Talk returns to the Bridgewater's finest YouTube channel because my team, the Montreal Canadiens, made a little trade today that I think is rather interesting, so we're going to have a chat about it. Earlier this afternoon, Marc Bergevin acquiring Eric Staal, center from the Buffalo Sabres, coming to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for third and fifth round picks in the upcoming 2021 NHL entry draft. Buffalo, for their part in this deal, acquiring those draft picks at the exchange of not only Staal, but retaining 50% of what remains of Eric Staal's money to be paid this season. He has a $3.25 million hit against the cap, Buffalo retaining 50% of what's left. And this is an interesting trade to me for a couple of reasons. And before I go into it more, a little tip of the cap to a good friend of mine, G. Hall, who pointed me in the direction of the information that I think might have come from Pierre Lebrun, which was that originally Montreal was one of 10 teams who sat on Eric Staal's no-trade list. He had a modified no-trade. Montreal was one of the teams that was on this list, so he had to waive that in order for this trade to take place. And I could understand why Montreal might have been one of the teams on his no-trade list. When you look at, all of a sudden, the depth that the Montreal Canadiens have up the middle, he would have to look at something like that and say, okay, I'm probably not going to play ahead of Phillip Danault. I'm probably not going to play ahead of Nick Suzuki, and I'm probably only sparingly ever going to play ahead of Jesperi Kotkaniemi. That'll, of course, depend on, some line mixing and things like that. So he's got to look at that and say, I'm most of the time probably going to be like a fourth line utility center, penalty killer, maybe very limited amount of time on the power play. There's obviously other things that would go into that, taxes and what have you. And of course, playing up in Canada, some players just plain don't want to. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but thank you, G, for pointing me in that direction. Now, you look at a player like Eric Staal and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe Montreal traded a third round pick and a fifth round pick for a guy that's only got 10 points in 30 some games this year. You got to remember who Eric Staal actually is. I mean, this is a former, I think, top 5 or top 10 pick when he was originally drafted into the league. Over 1,200 games of NHL experience. He's got over 1,000 points in those 1,200 games. Eric Staal has been a player in this league for quite some time, and a good one at that. And not only that, this is genuinely one of those trades where I think both sides did really well in this trade, and both sides got exactly what they were looking for out of a trade like this. You look at the Buffalo Sabres, they're mired in this major, 1,001 game losing streak or whatever it is that they happen to be on right now. I think it's up to 15 or 16 games now. This is a team that if they're not a rebuilding team right now, they're going to be very shortly. So this is about asset management. This is where Montreal was a couple of years ago. I hearken back to the Thomas Plekanec to Toronto trade, where Toronto sent them Renat Valiev and Kirby Reichel and second round picks or something like that. This trade feels very similar to a trade like that. Montreal was in the position at that time where they had an asset in Thomas Plekanec, and it would have been a failure of management with the position that Montreal was in. That would have been the year just before they drafted Kotkaniemi. The position that they were in was, you have this asset, it's not going to help you get any better. On Buffalo's side of things, you have this asset in Eric Staal. Yeah, not the player that he used to be, but still a well-known commodity in this league that can still play. It's a failure of leadership to not move that asset. Now, you could say they probably could have just done this trade, Eric Staal maybe straight up for a fourth or something like that with no salary retained. But again, this is where the job of the NHL GM is very nuanced, and we don't really give these GMs credit for how good they are in making deals like this. On the part of the Buffalo Sabres, it was nothing for Buffalo to eat money in exchange for draft capital. That's exactly what they did in this deal. By retaining that remaining 50% of whatever they had to pay Eric Staal, they turned the Eric Staal return into much more than what it would have been just on its face value. It is nothing for the Buffalo Sabres to eat 50% of whatever remains on his $3.25 million in exchange for better draft picks, more draft capital. The fifth round pick, I should say, is probably only included in this deal strictly because of the amount of retained salary. So it was a good move on the part of Buffalo's front office to say, yeah, we'll eat the rest of that money, or 50% of the rest of that money, in exchange for a little bit more coming back to us. That's good asset management, smart move by the Sabres. And on Montreal's side, yes, you're getting a guy that's probably going to play only very sparingly in your top 9, but you're bringing in a ton of experience, a ton of playoff experience. You're bringing in a really, really solid face-off center, which has still been a problem for the Canadiens. Face-offs has been like a perpetual issue for Montreal, and a lot of people say the face-off stat is overrated. I think it's possession, and that's a whole conversation. But it's important to win faceoffs. You can't go about losing way more faceoffs than you win and expect to win a lot of nights. Like, that can be the difference in how close these NHL games can be. That's the difference between winning and losing some nights. So bringing in a specialist like that who can take important faceoffs, whether it's in the offensive zone or defensive zone, this is a move that, in exchange for some draft capital, makes the Montreal Canadiens a more dangerous team on the ice today. And they're trying to take advantage of how good they are right now, how much better they're going to be. They're trying to maximize that and trying to maximize the windows on some of these aging players. You're talking about a Carey Price. You're talking about a Shea Weber. Depth is important. We see how important depth is come playoff time, hoping that Montreal gets there. It's exceedingly important. And for Montreal to make a move like this, it makes their team better. It gives them more depth. And they're really not giving up that much. On the surface, a third round and a fifth round pick, it seems like a lot, but Montreal has multiple third round picks and multiple fifth round picks still, even after the 2 that they just traded. They traded their own third round pick and their own fifth round pick. If they expect to make the playoffs, those are mid-round picks at best. They still have 2 other third round picks and 2 other fifth round picks. The Montreal Canadiens do not want for draft capital in the 2021 draft. They have plenty of it. A move like this, there's no downside for them. So genuinely, at the end of the day, I just think this is a move that makes both teams happy. Both teams get exactly what they want out of this deal. It's a nice, fun little hockey trade, honestly, that I certainly was not expecting to see coming, but this could be one of those things where more of these hockey deals are going to start filtering in now as we approach the trade deadline, which I believe is sometime in mid-April this year. And obviously, we expect the Buffalo Sabres to be exceedingly active. So yeah, Montreal gets better. Buffalo gets better at the draft. Everybody wins. Do have to point out, of course, Eric Staal will have to quarantine as he's entering Canada to play. So that's 14 days once he enters the country. Montreal obviously has had some games postponed because of players in COVID protocol. So it's not like he's going to miss 14 games or anything like that, but he will have to miss that 14-day chunk after he enters Canada. So there we go. What did you guys think of the trade? Do you think Montreal got the better end of it? Do you think Buffalo got the other end of it? Are you like me and you just think this is a good hockey trade where both teams win? Let me know in the comments section below. And if Montreal makes another deal, I guess we'll be back on here to talk about it. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Kind of fun to be talking hockey again. Let's keep this up.